What is up, you guys? It is me, Suha Michaels. I am back with another episode of Chasing Justice for you guys. First things first, if you would like to subscribe to my channel, I would appreciate it. And whilst you do subscribe to my channel, if you choose to, please hit your notifications bell. Therefore, you are informed whenever I do upload a YouTube video. As always, leave a like on today's video. Please feel free to comment anything you like, whether that be case suggestions or your opinion on the case today or any other case in future videos. Now, before today's video starts, I have just one thing to say, and that is basically I have spent around, I want to say, 8 to 8.5 months researching this particular case. So this video may be a little bit longer than what I am probably going to be posting out for the future. However, just bear with me a second because today's video is jam-packed, and I mean jam-packed with information. So if you guys are interested in learning a bit more about this crime, please stay forward and please stick watching this video. You know what I mean? It's, I know a lot of people don't like to watch long crime videos, but it is definitely worth it because this video is going to be jam-packed with information in a nutshell. But if you don't want to watch because of the video's entirety or because it's a long video, I totally understand. I respect it. Peace out. Hopefully I get to see you in the next video, and let's begin today's case. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chasing Justice, Season 1, Episode 2, the case of Robert William Fisher. So, the Robert William Fisher case begins on April the 10th, 2001, in a small American town that was very picturesque, very family friendly, and was very much geared towards family. It was very big houses, beautiful houses. It was in Phoenix, in Arizona. It was beautiful, in a little town called Scottsdale. On this particular evening, the police received numerous frantic and hysterical calls from members of the public in the town of Scottsdale and surrounding areas after they heard a gas explosion that could be heard for miles and was reportedly that strong and that intense, the explosion itself, it was shattering people's windows. Not only that, shortly thereafter, there was a fire, and it didn't take long for this house, which was a reasonably big house, it didn't take long for this house to burn down completely. This house literally burned down in minutes. Now, police were unsure if there was anybody inside of the house, but they did know that this house belonged to a family of 4, a husband, a wife, and 2 children. Police and firefighters and other investigating services, as well as people that were there on the scene, just, general people there trying to help, were unable to get inside of the house due to the intensity of the fire. So the question of was anybody in the premises during this particular time of the fire or was there not, they were unable to tell at that point. Therefore, there was some confusion, some speculation. Now, shortly thereafter, after the numerous calls and, people in the neighbourhood gathering around this house that had not only had exploded but had set ablaze, this attracted a lot of attention. Obviously, a lot of people from the public were phoning into emergency services, like I mentioned before. And not only that, now news people were onto it. So news people were reporting there's actually live footage you can find via YouTube or on the internet if you guys want to go and look for yourself. If I can find some, I will try and link them in the description box below. But that's not a promise because technology isn't my strong point. So as the town of Scottsdale were all gathered around this one particular area, trying to help, trying to put out the blaze, which was practically eating away at this house. Like I said, the house burned down within minutes. Now, people thought this was just a regular house fire at first, but they had no idea what was about to be discovered when they put this blaze out finally. Also, before we move on, I would just like to explain this photo behind me. So here we have, this is Robert William Fisher. This is his wife, Mary Fisher. This is their daughter, Brittany, and this is their son, Bobby. Tragedy, heartbreak, suspense, and questions upon questions were to begin to appear more and more throughout the beginnings of this case, because people were purely just unsure. There was so much speculation. Nobody really knew what happened until the next day, when the pieces of the puzzle started to finally form. The chase for justice continues. Also around this time, the police investigating services and the fire department were unable to work out what had caused this fire. So the following day, when the fire was finally put out, amongst the wreckage was a heartbreaking discovery. It was 3 people that were deceased. Here behind me, I don't know if you guys can see all that well, but here are some more pictures of Robert William Fisher behind me. So take a good look at this face and just remember it. Shortly thereafter, the 3 bodies that were found at the scene of the fire were identified as Mary Fisher, Brittany Fisher, and Bobby Fisher, although Robert William Fisher was not present at the scene. Bobby Fisher was aged 10 years old, and Brittany Fisher, this is a little bit confusing to me when I was doing my research. Some sources were saying she was 13 years old, and some sources were saying that she was 12 years old, but she was either 12 or 13 years of age. Investigating services later said that all 3 victims looked comfortable in bed, as though they had just simply been asleep, which would not commonly be the reaction to a gas explosion or to a fire in your home. You wouldn't just sit there peacefully sleeping. So that was very suspicious to investigating services as well. So the $1 million question is, where is Robert Fisher? And what happened to Mary? What happened to Bobby? What happened to Brittany? Why was there a house fire? Why was there a gas explosion? What caused these events? Like, nobody knew what was going on. Not only was Robert Fisher missing from the crime scene, but also the family SUV was missing, along with the family's dog that was named Blue. Upon further investigation, it was determined that the fire was actually caused deliberately, and the gas pipe was also broken deliberately. So if the fire didn't work, what would definitely work would be the gas catching onto the fire. So it was basically a catch-22 situation. Mary, Bobby, and Brittany, even if they were left alive, probably wouldn't have seen that coming, so therefore their chances of surviving anyway were very, very minimal. The fire was also an obvious attempt to try and cover up the evidence and destroy evidence permanently, therefore there would be no trace. And I think probably in Robert's mind he was thinking that meant that the bodies would burn away, all the evidence would burn away, and Robert would be totally untraceable, but forgetting the pretty obvious fact of this is the Fisher family home. They live in Scottsdale. They are a well-known family. They are a church-going family. They're a very respected family. So I don't know. I don't understand quite what Robert's mindset was. Also, at this point, Robert Fisher was not considered a suspect in this case, which kind of has me baffled a little bit, because if there's a fire that has also been involved with a gas explosion and you're telling us that it is intentional and these people are found in their bed, a woman and her 2 kids, they're deceased and her husband is missing, and you're not thinking he's somewhat of a suspect. That was the only thing that baffled me, because to me, I look at it as like he would be a pretty obvious suspect. Like, he's the husband, people around the town know him, he works in the town, he worked at the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, Arizona, he was a nurse, so he was known to people. Now, it was reported that Bobby and Brittany were both found in their beds looking comfortable, and they had their throats sliced from ear to ear, and it was fatal. It is believed that this is what they both died from, because some reports stated that the cuts were so deep to the throat that the children were almost decapitated. Now, Mary Fisher was also discovered in her bed as well, and the only difference between the murder of Bobby and Brittany and the murder of Mary was not only did Mary have her throat sliced, but Mary's murder was taken up a level in terms of violence, in terms of extreme extremeness. Mary had her throat sliced from ear to ear, and she was also shot in the head. In case you're wondering, this is Mary Fisher behind me on the screen. So, a common misconception amongst people is that if you start a house fire or a bonfire, or you put a bunch of stuff together to try and destroy evidence and you set it alight, a lot of people think that is going to turn a body instantly into ash. Now, this theory is very much false, and I will explain why. In order to burn a body, the temperature of the fire must be 2000 degrees plus in order to turn a human body into ash. Now, the problem with a house fire or a gas explosion or a bonfire, so on and so forth, whatever you want to call it or whatever you want to look at, the difference is those types of fires don't burn to the temperature of 2000 degrees plus. So that's how they were able to differentiate the difference between the fires and the causes. Although I do want to mention that it is possible that a house fire could burn the body of a small child or a baby, not a fully grown adult, and not a 10-year-old child, and not a 12 or 13-year-old child, and obviously not a grown woman. So Robert kind of didn't properly think that through or didn't properly look into that. And what baffled me was Robert would have somehow had knowledge of how to get away with the crime. You know, he had a background, he was in the Navy, he worked as a firefighter, he was a nurse, he'd done all these different careers and he'd learned a lot. And obviously he must have learned amongst, you know, his training in the Navy and the training as a nurse. You know what I'm saying? He's a smart man. So I think that the fact that he didn't figure that out about the house fire was baffling. So at this point, the people of Scottsdale were thinking pretty much, is Robert Fisher a kidnap victim? Is he a survivor that doesn't want to come forward? He's too scared to come forward. Has he had an injury and perhaps he's lost his memory? He's got temporary memory loss. Has he vanished? What's happened to Robert Fisher is the question that people of Scottsdale want to know. But again, he still wasn't being considered as a suspect as of yet. Or was Robert Fisher running away from the fact that he was responsible for not only the death of his wife and his children, but also starting a deliberate fire and a gas explosion in an attempt to destroy evidence and in an attempt to distract the police and investigating services to buy himself more time? Let's find out as the chase for justice continues. Also, I just want to mention that around this time, this was when the news and the media people really begun to take interest in this particular case. So there was live footage, there was newspapers, there was live reports on TV covering these events and what had transpired, what they had discovered. On the night before the murders at 5 p.m, Robert Fisher was actually witnessed leaving his job as a nurse. He worked at the Mayo Clinic and he was seen getting into his car and heading home. Robert Fisher was described as a church-going man, a family man, a loving father, a loving husband, and he also had a different side to him. He was also described as a narcissist, as very controlling, as somebody that was paranoid and quite possibly delusional, and somebody that had to have everything his way. As the investigation into the house fire and the 3 deaths continued, it was discovered that the cause of the fire was an accelerant. So it was believed that the accelerant was poured down the hallways of the Fisher home. And as mentioned prior, the gas pipe was either cut or broken. And not only that, they believed that Robert had left a lit candle on the floor so that if the accelerant didn't catch fire, the gas would most definitely react to the fire, causing the explosion, which was inevitable. It did happen. So I'm going to say basically IMO, and this is an acronym for my opinion, okay? So it means in my opinion, but it's an acronym, so we're going to call it IMO. So the fire, I believe, and the murders of the family, Murray, Bobby, and Brittany, I believe that they were premeditated. I believe that Robert most definitely did premeditate this because it was too well planned out and it was too thought through, in my opinion, to be something that was just spontaneous or something that just happened out of the blue or he snapped. Do you know what I'm saying? Premeditation in the sense of he waited until nighttime. He waited until everybody was asleep, probably in their bed, because there was no disturbance. It didn't look like, it didn't look like Murray had got up out of bed. It didn't look like Bobby had got up out of bed. It didn't look like Brittany had got up out of bed. They were comfortable. So it shows premeditation in the sense of Robert had time to think this through. He had time to say to himself, right, okay, I could do this, but I'm going to cool off and I'm going to choose not to. But obviously, he chose to do that to his family, which shows premeditation, because you've got to really think that through, to wait until your wife and your son and your daughter are asleep in their beds and you go up to them and you slice their throat from ear to ear, and you, not only that, you put a bullet in your wife's head, and then you decide that you're going to pour accelerants all down the hallways, and then you're going to break or cut the gas pipe and then leave a lit candle to catch on to either the accelerants or the gas, which is also my second point in this, could be premeditated, in my opinion, IMO, because it's a catch-22 situation. If you don't know what a catch-22 situation is, it is basically a situation where you can't win either way. So basically, if he had left the family alive and they'd attempted to escape, first of all, he's a man. He could easily overpower them. He had access to guns. There was numerous guns found in the Fisher home later on. Not only that, he was in the Navy. He had that type of training. He was an avid outdoorsman. He had a knife, because he slit their throat from ear to ear. They weren't really going to last very long if they'd attempted to escape, because of Robert's power and the fact that he had access to all of these weapons. He was very manipulative. He was narcissistic. So in his mind, he had to have premeditated it, because even in death, he controlled how they died. He decided that he was going to wait consciously till his wife and his 2 children were asleep, to go into their room and do something so brutal and something so life-changing. Do you know what I'm saying? You can't just do that spontaneously. I don't think, especially IMO, when you're a narcissist, I don't think it just happens spontaneously. It has to be all about them, or they have to have some form of control in every situation. And the examples I've just given show premeditation and show Robert's narcissism, IMO, and his need and want to control everything. He controlled how everything went that night. He controlled when he chose to attack. He chose everything consciously. A local pastor had come forward and said that he had seen the family in church and there was no issues, there was nothing wrong. And also, the family was seen attending a gun safety class where, again, there was no red flags, there was no issues, there was nothing reported. They seemed like everything was normal and joyous. And as I mentioned before, there were numerous guns found at the Fisher home that belonged to Robert Fisher, although one gun was missing, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But it was believed that Robert had purchased these guns for his hunting. He was very into his hunting. He was an avid outdoorsman. He enjoyed camping. He enjoyed, building dens. He enjoyed going hunting, fishing, those kinds of things. I am all call them manly things. Don't take offense to that, but the manly type activities, fishing and exploring the woods, climbing, hiking, things of that nature. Detectives in the 2011 documentary Where is Robert Fisher, which will be in the description box below if anybody is interested in viewing, states that apparently neighbours had heard Robert and Mary arguing around 10 a.m. Sorry, that's my fault, 10 p.m. At 10:42 p.m., Robert Fisher was seen at a cash machine attempting to withdraw money. Now, this particular cash machine had a maximum withdrawal amount, basically meaning that you could only withdraw a certain amount, and in Robert's case, he could only withdraw $280, which was the maximum daily withdrawal amount that was allowed for people that were with his bank, which, to be fair, is true because this has got nothing to do with the case, but my bank is NatWest that I am with, and we have the same kind of thing. It's a £250 maximum withdrawal limit. You can't withdraw any more than that, if that makes any sense. So it's not that he just took the $280 because he wanted to, or because he wasn't thinking. It was the fact that there was a limit to how much you could take from that cash machine. I'm not sure if that's the same for every card owner, but I know that's the same with me and with NatWest personally. I don't know. Let me know. Also, I just want to mention here that Robert William Fisher has not had an officially confirmed sighting since the 10th of April 2001. Now, I just want to interrupt here and say that there have been a few crime channels that have said that he has been seen 300 times and they have been confirmed. I can tell you that from somebody that's been studying this for almost 8.5 months, that what I've read personally tells me that, and what I've heard in the Where is Robert William Fisher documentary, which I'll link down below in the description box, is that these 300 sightings were not confirmed. So, sorry, but you're wrong. To the other crime channels that are saying that it was confirmed, you're wrong. It is unconfirmed, but there were apparently 300 unconfirmed sightings. So take that with a grain of salt because they're not 100% confirmed. Police decided the next day to go to Robert Fisher's place of work, which was the Mayo Clinic in Northeast Phoenix, Arizona. He was a nurse, and of course he did not turn up that day or any other day for his shifts. It was as though Robert Fisher had just simply vanished into thin air and was never seen again. The family vehicle that was missing was a silver 2000 Toyota 4Runner, and the investigation had been updated now to a triple homicide. Robert Fisher was, quote, outstanding. He is a vital part of this investigation, and we have still not labelled him as a suspect. So as well, even at this point, they're still not labelling him a suspect, which honestly baffles my mind. Not even slightly considering him a suspect, nobody thought, isn't it a bit strange that, there's a gun missing, the wife has been killed, the children have been killed, that's the triple homicide, the family SUV is missing, the family dog is missing, and where is Robert Fisher? And that wasn't enough to still make them even somewhat question it. That baffles my mind. Also behind me is the picture on the night that Robert William Fisher was seen at the CCTV cash machine thing. He was trying to withdraw his money. This is what he looked like the night of the murders, and he hasn't been seen since then. When police and investigating services begun to speak to family and friends of the Fishers, they'd said that the Fishers were a very nice family. They seemed like your typical American family. They were church going, they were loving, they were supportive. They seemed like the idyllic family with no issues on the outside, but of course on the inside things were very much different. And Friends and family also reported seeing absolutely no red flags whatsoever, other than sometimes they described Robert as a bit controlling and a little narcissistic, and also paranoid. Also, Mary's father came forward and made a public appeal to Robert William Fisher to please come forward. Wherever he was, please come forward. And Mary's father stated in the interview that was live, it was live news, you guys can find it on the internet. He stated that he still loved Robert and he still cared for Robert, and he didn't think that Robert had anything to do with this. He thought that Robert was just a victim in something that had happened. It was a very terrible event. Her father didn't didn't believe Robert could do something like that. But sadly, Robert Fisher never did come forward, and still to this day, we don't know if Robert Fisher is alive or deceased. And not only that, we don't know where he's located. So he could be anywhere. Anywhere. Especially at this point, because it's been so long. It's been 16 years since this happened. Sorry, I mean, he's been on the FBI's most wanted list for 16 years. And this tragic event happened almost 19 years ago. So he's had 19 years collectively to hide, to disguise himself, to move on with life, to build a new identity, to meet new people, meet new friends, he could possibly, right this very second, be sat with a new family, and they have no idea whatsoever that he slaughtered his last family and left them to burn in a house and cut the cord to the gas and let the gas leak out and let the house explode. He went into his children's bedroom and sliced their throats from ear to ear to the point where they were nearly decapitated. And he could be, just that thought of he could be sat with somebody right now, he could have a wife and kids, and they have no clue. Must be the most freakiest feeling. It was finally, shortly thereafter, Mary's father had made the public appeal. He was finally announced as a suspect. Police and investigating services made it public, made it official that finally Robert William Fisher was now a suspect in the murder of his wife and his 2 children. The public and the police were told, the public were told to not approach Robert William Fisher if they seen him or if they suspected somebody to be Robert William Fisher, because Robert William Fisher was considered armed and extremely dangerous. Like I said before, there was a gun missing from the house, which we'll get to later on in this video. Just the brutal fashion as well, the way that he killed his family, the fact that he was trying to cover his tracks, the fact that there's a lot of premeditation, IMO, the fact that he had a military type training, the fact that he was a nurse, the fact that he had education, he was smart. Do you know what I'm saying? He had money, he knew people, so they were dealing with somebody that they knew at this point was dangerous and was smart and would be a challenge, especially, with like the military training and stuff. They train you to, in the different types of situations, and they train you for combat, they train you for war. And he was an avid outdoorsman as well. He was into hunting. He liked camping, he liked hiking, he liked staying out for weeks in the woods. Do you know what I mean? So I think police knew at this point Robert William Fisher was going to be pretty hard to catch, because he had at least a 10 to a 12-hour head start before they considered him a suspect and finally decided to look into Robert Fisher. He had a 10 to 12-hour head start. Which, again, the fact that he wasn't even remotely considered a suspect baffles my mind, because to me it's so obvious. Like, to us it's so obvious that are listening to this or that have already come across this case. It's very obvious that he should have been considered a suspect. But you sit there and think, don't you, why wasn't he considered a suspect way earlier? Why was he considered a suspect only when he had a 10 to 12-hour head start? Now he could be anywhere. He could be out the country and we don't even know. Do you know what I'm saying? So what police and investigating services believed happened was that Robert had killed the children first. Therefore, that if he had attacked Mary, which again shows premeditation, if he had attacked Mary first, there was chance of her, screaming or making a or making a big distraction or making putting up a fight or screaming to the children, go, get out, you know what I mean? So it was easier for Robert to get the children first because then Mary couldn't really, say to them, right, go, 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 or she couldn't try and save them. So he got them first, and they believe that he waited for Mary and got Mary too. And, the big kind of like fuck you thing, the last kind of fuck you to her was the bullet in the head. You know what I mean? Like, my question would be, yeah, they had an argument prior, like a few hours prior, but not even a few hours prior. It was like 45 minutes prior. And, you know, I just can't fathom having an argument with my significant other and then deciding that I'm going to do something so brutal to them. It's baffling. The gun missing from the home was a 357 Magnum gun, and again, it was just kind of, obvious who the suspect was now at this point. And, police were focusing more on Robert Fisher and were kind of coming to the conclusion, yes, this is our man. This is the man that has not only taken 3 lives, but has decided to burn down the house and cause a gas explosion and is now on the run and has a 10 to 12 hour head start. Now, I was unable to find out whether this next gun was the 357 Magnum or was a different gun, but police say that Robert has the gun as well that he shot Mary in the head with. So again, I just want to make it clear, I don't know for sure if it was the 357 Magnum or it was another gun. Sources never really definitively said. Upon further investigation and analysis of the bullet that was found in Mary's head, it did not match any of the guns that were present at the house. During the investigation into Robert William Fisher and the murders of his wife and children, what police were particularly interested in and took a huge interest in, and it became a really big topic, was Robert's relationship with Mary. They had a very tumultuous relationship. They had a very antagonizing relationship. It was said that Robert was very narcissistic. Everything had to be about him in one way, shape, or form. And he wanted Mary to confide to his ways. He didn't want to get a divorce because he had suffered trauma from his parents getting a divorce. And he didn't want to go through all of that. So he was very controlling. He wanted Mary to be how he wanted her to be. And Mary wasn't like that. Mary wanted to do her own thing. She wanted to be a mum. She wanted to enjoy herself. She was helping out in the community. She was volunteering in schools. She was all in all a generally nice person. And she didn't want to be controlled by Robert. She wanted to be herself. She wanted to be Mary Fisher. And Robert, because he was so narcissistic and controlling and paranoid, he was not going to let that happen. In his mind, he was thinking, you are joking if you think that you're just going to be a mum and you're going to help other people and none of it's going to be about me. That's that, in my opinion. So, as I mentioned prior, Robert William Fisher worked at the Mayo Clinic in Northeast Phoenix, Arizona as a nurse. But let's take a look really, really quickly into some of his background careers and some of these other careers that he's done throughout the years. In the past, he worked as a firefighter. He was a firefighter for a few years, and prior to that, he was in the Navy. Now, unfortunately, Robert's firefighting career came to a halt, a permanent halt, when he suffered a back injury in San Diego and he unfortunately had to quit his job. And this back injury took years to recover from. He had to have surgery on it. He now has a scar on his lower back, which is still visible. So collectively, Robert was he took a very, very long time to recover from not only the back surgery but the back injuries. Also, as police were looking into this investigation and into this case, Robert's personality also became of high interest. And of course, they began to explore Robert as a person and not so much just as the husband, more as a person. They particularly chose to focus on Robert's controlling personality, that particular aspect of his personality. So they concluded in their investigation that Robert was very narcissistic, he was very controlling, and a lot of people said Robert was really hard to get along with. So, in the 2011 documentary that I will link down below in the description box for you guys, in my opinion, IMO, we see a lot of Robert's controlling nature in some of the video clips that are provided in this particular documentary. Now, when I was watching this documentary for research purposes, I felt uncomfortable watching one clip in particular. It kind of felt like, in the clip, basically, Robert had his daughter and I think she was in his arms, if I remember correctly, and then he put her down on the floor and he was like, show your dress. Show them your dress. Spin around. Like, a very demanding tone. And he kept saying to his wife, Mary, are we going to turn the camera off now? And she's like, yeah, in a second. And he's like, are we going to? Just like a very demanding tone that made even me personally feel uncomfortable. And it takes a lot to make me feel uncomfortable, you know what I mean? And I was kind of like, oh, like, felt like a very demanding tone. Like, and if you go and watch that documentary, which I'll link below again in the description for you guys, you will see that that particular clip is very, I would describe it as intense and very, you kind of feel like going, oh, you know, like you're being spoken down to. So IMO, that is another example, a physical example of Robert Fisher's controlling nature. Telling Mary, when are you going to do it? You need to turn the camera off. And telling his daughter, turn around, show them your dress in like a very army-like commander marshal type tone, you know what I mean? On April 9th, 2001, the night before the murders, Robert Fisher attended an induction with his daughter, Brittany, and it was reported that Robert was acting very strange, and it was reported that he made Brittany leave early before she could claim her certificate. So she couldn't even go up and get her certificate, which is again an example of Robert's narcissism. She couldn't go and get this certificate, her achievement, her reward. She couldn't go and have her moment because Robert wasn't having it. Robert wanted it to be about him, which is what narcissists typically do. Everything has to be about them. And if it's not about them organically, they'll make it about themselves. So if it's not about them, it doesn't involve them, or they don't have enough attention, they'll do stuff to get the attention or to get what it is that they want. And what they want collectively and what they want more than anything is attention and for everything to be about them. And they don't realise that that's not how life works. Not every single situation can be about you. It just can't. And that same night it was reported that Mary had took Bobby to his hunting class and there was no issues there. Nothing seemed off with Mary or Bobby. They seemed fine. They seemed just like their normal, regular selves. No red flags, no issues. And of course, later that night at 10 p.m, that was when the neighbours had reported that they had heard Robert arguing with Mary and it was very intense. Also around this point, they had come to the conclusion in regards to the cash machine issue, they'd come to the conclusion that Robert didn't want to take out the $280. He wanted to take out more, but perhaps, probably, maybe, we don't know. Perhaps he didn't know that there was a set limit that you could withdraw, which was the $280. So he couldn't withdraw any more than $280, and he probably didn't think of that. It's also worth noting that Robert Fisher did not access that particular bank account ever again. So as the police put out their public appeals and news got out that they were looking for Robert Fisher, some of the alleged sightings and unconfirmed sightings were one was a couple that said they were driving down a road and they seen a man that was matching Robert's description walking up the road. Another man, which has remained unidentified, has come forward and said that he possibly helped a man that was Robert Fisher pull his car out of a ditch. But again, I just want to make it super clear that none of these sightings were 100% confirmed. On April the 20th, 2001, the family